I want to welcome Billy Ekofo to our episode, CIR Realty Business Mastery. Today is a conversation about racism. And I got to be honest, I'm a bit nervous about this conversation because you don't want to say the wrong thing. And this is something that I don't do a lot of social media posting. Some people will notice it to go to my account. It's like, boy, he just shares stuff his wife's posts with him and the baby. And lots of times I don't know what to say during this time. And I don't know what I should say or if I should say anything. And I don't want to seem insensitive. And I'm tiptoeing around this. And I feel like I am totally ill-equipped to talk about this because of obviously being white and the position that I'm in. And I'll first of all just say that. So if anything on the call, I just want to say here, anything on this webinar that we talk about, if I say anything, I'm like, take it in a way of trying to understand. And that's sort of my caveat on this. And I feel like I have to tiptoe. But before anything in the conversation, I just want to introduce Billy. Billy's been in the real estate industry for about 6 years, but Billy is an MBA. He is the Vice President of Business Solutions for leading real estate companies in the world. He's doing phenomenal things to help CIR Realty and the Canadian members within the network to get engaged. And he is the communication master. Billy has one of the highest levels of integrity that I know of in terms of email response time, getting back, doing exactly what he says he's going to do, preparation. Billy, first of all, just thank you again for joining us. It's outstanding to have you.
My pleasure. Now I have to live up to this person you just introduced. Thanks, Lindsay.
Well, let's start off here. And Billy, I think we would be remiss by not going back because for people that aren't necessarily in the Inman circles, Billy's a bit of a celebrity. And I'm not going to say a bit in the real estate industry. Billy is a celebrity because he has a fascinating story. So Billy, take us back and tell us about where you grew up and how you ended up where you are today.
So, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for making the time to having me. Hello, CIR. I hope everyone's doing well. So a little bit about me. I was born in the U.S. from immigrant parents. So my parents, especially my dad, was here for grad school, and my mom came over, and I just happened to be born in the United States. And so, but a year after my birth, Dad went to get his PhD in France. So it packed up the entire family and we moved there. And I'm originally from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So if you know your geography, it's one of the biggest country in Central Africa, if not the biggest. And so, after Dad got his PhD in France, a doctorate, right? Like he decided to go back home because at that point it's been gone for at least 7 years. At very minimum, right, between the masters and the PhD. So we went back to the Congo. So my, citizenship was just an American on paper, right? I was playing soccer with all the kids there. I was talking the common dialect. I still speak the common dialect there, which is Lingala, right?
Wow.
It's kind of like I was a Congolese citizen by everything else. The only thing that separated me from everybody else was literally my citizenship, which was a U.S. one. So fast forward to 1998, the Congo unfortunately had some experiences with civil unrest, and 1998 was one of those years where the unrest just culminated, right? The sitting dictator that was there was literally pushed out, and a rebel general basically took over the power. That insecurity, coupled with the fact that in one of the neighborhood countries, Rwanda, they had their own situation happening there, genocide, which spilled over in the Congo. So it was a hot mess, right? The perfect sort of storm happening at once. And of course, if you a foreign citizen, right, your government at that time would have asked that you be evacuated from the country. So I'm the only American in my family. We're a family of four, right? I'm the only one that's born there. the order came in to evacuate all U.S. citizens. I think becoming a parent gave me a certain understanding as to the difficulty of making the decision, because my parents basically looked out at what's the worst that could happen. We have one child that could literally escape. And so if we can save one of our kids, let it be the one that had that's well positioned for that, which happened to be me with the U.S. citizenship, right? So they made the decision there that I was going to be the one leaving. Well, essentially, they didn't make the decision. Like, they were told that I needed to go. And so I got on a plane, and this is 1998. I was 17 years old, which you can calculation as to what my age is now. But basically a teenager, nothing, no money, no bank account, right? Like a duffel bag or whatever a teenager in a third world country can own. That was my life. And and then I had a business card that my dad gave me, basically said, once you reach the United States, make sure you contact this person, which was a family friend from the Congo who emigrated to the United States about 5 or 6 years before all this mess in 1998 happened. That was literally my entry point to the US, right? So picture me flying from the Congo to Europe, Europe to New York, New York finally to Virginia, because that's where our contact was there, right? And so I landed in Richmond International Airport in Virginia, literally with nothing except a couple of changes in my pocket and a business card with our family friend, right? So that was so this is the setup. This is me coming to the US, right, with no notion of what to expect, except that whatever that call was going to be, like, that was my lifeline here. If if nobody answered that call, Lindsay, you and I wouldn't be talking today, right? Like, so this is how crazy this is. Like, one person took my phone call and completely changed the course of my entire life. So that's the background, right? So everything you're talking about today, yeah, right? Like, so this is the setup.
Give us the Coles notes, because I feel like there's a lot left to be rediscovered in there. So you're here, you get with this family, and give us just sort of the highlight points of they were obviously an awesome family, mm-hmm. and how'd you get to today? Like, just give us the stepping stones.
Sure. So there's a twist to the story, right? So the family that I'm supposed to contact is a Congolese family, right? They have no idea that Billy's coming. The first time they hear from me is basically when I called from the airport. And graciously, they were like, look, come and stay with us. But they had they weren't ready for an additional kid to live with them. They made arrangement for me to stay with an American family who happened to be Caucasian, sort of middle class. And they were like, look, we have a big house. Billy can stay with us. It was a single mom with 3 kids and 7 cats, by the way. So for you cat lovers, I hope you appreciate this. But yeah, they could have said no. Like, they just said, look, we have the means to helping you, and we'll do it, right? Which meant, feeding me, clothing me, right? Putting me in school, or, and making sure I study, making sure I graduate, right? So all those sort of things. And then, from high school, I finished high school in Norfolk, Virginia. Finished high school, went to college, 4 years undergraduate studies, came back, met my wife, in the same area, went and got master's, and then there was an opportunity to move to Northern Virginia. We moved to Northern Virginia. I started selling real estate in 2014. The brokerage that I was selling with, right, they made me an offer to come on board as a full-time person. And so I moved from a sales person to I was managing leads for a brokerage, our brokerage. So online leads that were coming in, I was the person incubating all of them and setting appointments for our agents, right? And then I did that. I did recruiting. I went and worked for Inman for a little bit, and then came back to the same brokerage, did recruiting now for the entire company, not just a particular area, which what I was doing before. And then an opportunity came to come to LeadingRE, and that's it, right? But it was, I think it was, right? It was a series of very, very targeted interactions with people. And I say this, with all my, as possible, it's being truthful as possible. I wouldn't be here today if people didn't invest into my life, right? And I think part of, to me, the reason why Billy's life matters, right? It's not necessarily because of my skin color. And I know this is gonna cause people to be like, well, don't you care about Black Lives Matter? Well, we all do, right? But I think there's a certain part in the narrative that I will be dishonest if I didn't acknowledge to, right? That there's a lot of people from different races in my background that have played significant role in my life, right? The fact that they've laid down their resources, whether it's time, money, contacts, right? They sacrifice a whole lot for me, right? That's why my life matters. Like, it's not certainly because of my race. It's the fact that people have invested so much effort and so much resources in making sure I had opportunities. Those are the people that I need to honor, right? And I work hard, and I try to do the best I can because I feel like I'm a steward of the time and resources they invested into me. It will be a shame if I squander them, right? Their sacrifice is what gives me gives me any importance, right? Like, in terms of recognition, it's like, it's not, without them, you wouldn't have Billy, right? So that's the way I approach it, right? It's not necessarily, something of, skin color is easier to see, but really, let's, to be completely honest about it, it's the fact that people have made conscious investment into, helping me become the professional or the friend, whatever you have that I am today. So,
wow, we always start our meetings off with everyone sharing a gratitude in our chat, and we always share gratitude as well. And I've always been grateful for the fact that I was, have no, I have 2 working arms, 2 working legs. I got a brain that works, and I feel like it's my duty every day to utilize those to offer value to the world. Yeah. And I never thought about being a steward of the gifts that other people have given me. And I love that perspective. And we all have, people in our lives, our parents, or, if we were adopted, different things like that, teachers, mentors, other people, other colleagues who have invested time, energy, and resources into you. I love that perspective, Billy. I think that's outstanding. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and when you think about it, the amount of grace that everyone shows you on your journey, right? It's unreal, right? How many times have I messed up? How many times, could I have lost a job because of a mistake I've made? And still, my supervisor or employer at the time, whatever, friend was like, look, let me give you another go at this. Yeah. Right? Like that's, to me, that's what is worth honoring. And so, it's not distracting from the fact that there's some things that happen in, especially in the US, right? Or even to some point, even in Canada. It's not distracting from the fact that people of color have, let's call it what it is. Like, sometimes they're being passed for opportunities or whatever. But those things also exist in other places in the world, right? I escaped a genocide or right from a neighborhood country. Like, those are people who literally look the same. To anybody that doesn't know the nuances, they look the same, they appear the same, yet they slaughter each other, right? Just to give you some statistics, on the first day the Rwanda genocide started, 500,000 people died, right? Like, I'm not talking about someone being shot or, one person dying, right? 500,000 people died in like the first day. And so, like, this is literally, wow. I mean, and this is recent history, like 1998, it's not that far removed from our time, right? But that's, and those are people who literally looked the same. And the only reason why one tribe went after the other was literally because of tribalism, right? The narrative that we use to even address each other, right? Like, one tribe started calling the other, inferior, they were cockroaches, and then it was on the radio, and the media was used to fuel that difference until the day people literally grabbed machetes and were like, let's go after each other, right? This is what I escaped from. So coming to the US, right, like there's, please don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things that need to be addressed, right? Like there's a lot of injustices, whatever. But I think for me personally, if I were to worry about just how much it's not worth my energy to worry about it on a scale that I should be grateful and thankful for what other people have done and continue to do for me. That's the fire that fuels, like, my life. Like, I don't go out every day. When I used to go out, I guess COVID's changed that too. But when I went out, it never entered into my mind that I should be fearful for my life. Sometimes, I don't know, people have other phobias, right? Like other fears. The thought of some, a Caucasian person coming to me and do me harm just never entered my psyche, never, right? And because even in the midst of everything that's being talked about right now, it's just not registering, right? Because I don't, right? Like I go to the store, my kids go to school, whatever. Like we go, like yesterday we went. We're very fortunate. We had some friends that rented a boat and invited us, and we went out with them on the river. Great memories, right? Like it just never, and like that notion that I should be absolutely fearful for my life just never enters it.
Wow.
That has nothing to do with my background. It's just that I'm here, I'm walking out of my door, I'm going about my business. I don't fear anybody sort of coming at me and jumping. Yeah, well, they can try. I'm 6'4", 275 pounds of muscle.
Yeah.
we can have at it, right? But like, maybe that's intimidating, but that's not a fear that I share. And so, but that's not given to a lot of people. So maybe there's that too.
Well, let's talk for a second about, the racism that you've experienced in your life. And because although there isn't that, call it a fear for your personal safety, that doesn't mean that you haven't necessarily experienced things in your life that a lot of us can't relate to. And we're actually really fortunate as a brokerage because we have so many different races with us. And we are so grateful to have that in our, in some of our offices, the LeadingRE luxury thing or even LeadingRE and spanning the world. We have posters up of different areas of the world and we represent so many different countries. It's amazing. And we love it. But you have a unique experience because, and I remember we were sitting down for dinner in Banff and you were talking and you said, I wasn't Black enough because I had these white parents, and I also wasn't white enough to have to fit in with different groups because your background was mixed. You didn't come from the hood in Baltimore or something like that. It's like right. So take us through your life journey and the type of experiences you did have.
Yeah. So this is a great question, and I'm going to answer it from. Hopefully all these angles will make sense because this is how complex to me racism or the topic of racism is. So when I got here from the US, right? So I'm a teenager in Norfolk, Virginia. My host family is Caucasian, right? When you're in the Congo and you look at or certainly in other African countries, right? When you aspire to come to the US, you're trying to identify with something that's closer to you. And the closest thing to your culture might very well be African-American culture, right? You watch the movies, you fall in love with the sports, right? Athletes and the music, right? Rap music, all of this were appealing. So when I got here, that's what my initial aspiration was to live that life, right? And the moment I got closer to African Americans in my school, and by the way, this is not an indictment on African American culture in general. I'm just sharing my experience. The moment I got closer to African Americans there, my accent, right, was the first thing they noticed. It didn't compute. It made no sense to them. And so they did the first thing they could do, which was laugh at it, right? I speak French fluently, hence the reason I don't sound quite American. But they did, to them, that was something to make fun of, right? I didn't dress like most people dressed in high school. Like, I like my pants to fit my waist. I like my shirt to look a certain, right? I like my shirt to look a certain way, which wasn't welcome, right? I didn't listen to rap music. And to this day, I still don't quite listen to rap music, right? Because I love Irish music. Like, people are like, wait, what? I do, right? And in fact, two of my favorite artists, just happen to be Canadian, right? So Natalie McMaster, like, if you don't know who she is, she's an amazing violinist. And Lorena McKennitt, whose music is a bit more global, right? Like,
Mummer's Dance and Dante's Prayer are two of my favorite songs of all time. Honestly, Dante's Prayer is the #1 listened to song in all my Apple Music of all time. And it's like the slowest piano thing. It's amazing. It's amazing. Huge Lorena McKennitt fan. Anyway.
Right. Like, her voice is just, it could literally, like, if you're mad at the world.
Piercing.
Like,
Yes.
So, but like, I love that stuff, right? Like, that's, I love the complexity of the music. My son plays violin, hence Natalie McMaster, whatever. Like, rap music for me was not appealing. But again, when people find out about my music taste, they were like, well, okay, you're not black enough. Okay, well, what is that supposed to mean? Like, is there subculture here that, I should be aware of? So I was kind of cast out, right? So that was first experience. Then I go to, college. I went to a very small private college in sort of rural Virginia, considered South. 97% of the kids attending there were Caucasian, right? Now that you know sort of my backstory, if there was any hint of racism there, what would I have spent 4 years going there, right? Like, if I felt like people hated me, I literally spent my undergraduate studies going to a very Caucasian-heavy, all-male school in middle of nowhere, Virginia. So, and I had the absolute best time there. Like, I felt I was included. I felt like people appreciated me. I contributed. People wanted my contribution. Right? That was great. But, part of me that was confused internally was that I was brought up to sort of care about, looking at African Americans as my, culture I needed to associate with. And I felt like more so I spent time trying to fit in there and not getting accepted. And then the culture that everybody was basically saying, pay attention, like, those are the people to avoid, like white people, like, they were like, hey, we want to welcome you. We want to embrace you. And I'm sorry, I think someone is cutting his grass behind us. But if you hear some,
no, it's all good.
Okay, good. The culture I was sort of brought up to fear was very inclusive. So it was really, it was a weird time for me. Right? And so, but, that happened and was great. But here's where it gets complicated for me, right? If I were to go back to the Congo, say today, right, and want to start a business there or move my family there, I would not be accepted. Why? Because by now I have spent probably more time living abroad than I have living in the Congo. And my own people, right, the Congolese people will look at me and say, you're no longer one of us, right? So here's my dilemma, Lindsay. African Americans don't want to do anything with Billy. Congolese people don't want to do anything with Billy. And now you're telling me, right, that there's basically systematic racism built into all the institutions here in the United States that will make it so people that look like me could not even succeed. So where do I fit, right? And this is, I think, and this is part of the conversation that is not being addressed because nobody really it's not my perspective that people are looking for, but that's what I'm saying. It's like, when you speak to me about racism or, not being accepted culturally, that's the lens I'm looking at it. So I have 3 places where I could literally or hopefully find some sort of acceptance, and I'm not going to be accepted, right? My own people in the Congo, African Americans who still, just so you know, like if you follow me on Facebook, you'll notice that my family is, multicultural. My wife is half Irish, half Mexican, right? And my poor kids have now to suffer through this, right? So there's places in the United States where I can't even take my family because they will be cast out, right? So what, where do I fit in, right? I have, so to me, it's easier to identify racism and looking at someone that looks like you, Lindsay, and say, you're the source of all my problems. I'm like, well, nobody's addressing what I have to go through.
Right.
And that's part of the conversation as well. The other side of it, right? So trying to come full circle a little bit. If, Lindsay, if a Caucasian person were to come to me and say, Billy, I want to experience everything that you experience on a daily basis when it comes to racism. I want to walk with you. I want to, I just want to understand. I want to listen. And if I were to take a notebook like this, right, and basically write down everything that I have to deal with when it comes to discrimination, racism, whatever you have, and I handed this to my friends that are Caucasian, right? And I said, here it is. 365 days during the year, this is exactly what I experienced. Now you get to experience that, by just signing here at the bottom. And now you get to share that experience with me. Now, I'm no math genius, right? I'm pretty sure almost 99.9% of the people out there would not sign the document, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't, why should you live your comfort and everything that you work towards in your life to experience something that you're not ready for, right? And let's be honest, like, what kind of friend will I be if I want you to experience suffering? I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right? And so most Caucasian people will not want to embrace that. Here's the flip side of it. Even if you had the best intention, right? If you were to say, I will sign this, Billy, let's go, right? In most African-American, groups, they will look at that as you being privileged. The fact that you can even choose to be miserable
right.
is in itself a privilege to some other people. Or like, how dare you, right? Like, what are you trying to show? Like, this is my life every day and you can turn off your privilege and comment. No. So I don't think in terms of race conversation, we are being honest about it. Like, we, not here, obviously, but just the collective conversation is not being approached from a point of honesty. On one hand, you have people who say they want to embrace and they want to understand and they want to jump in, in the waters of injustice with you. Given the option, they wouldn't want to take it. On the other hand, you have a group of people who want, who keep asking to be heard and they want change. But when you're trying to meet them where they are, they're not going to let you. So this is where we are, right? Like in terms of the conversation, nobody wants to admit where they are, honestly. And I think as long as we do not address that, to me, we're still circling around the issue. It was a long-winded answer, but there's a lot there.
There's a lot there. There's a lot there to unpack. And well, let's turn that to recent events now. Let's
sure.
So the death of George Floyd has brought the topic front and center. The riots, the protests that we see here, and we like to think that Canada isn't as bad in some places as some place in the US, but I would say that there's pockets of it. And I will tell you something, that when you go to a lot of places in Canada, anywhere in Canada, it exists. And also, I mean, especially some of the rural areas where it's just as as visible and as unfiltered as you can possibly have it. And then you have it where you have, big centers like Toronto and Calgary and Vancouver, where it is more, I would say, systemic versus just, what's the word I'm looking for? Obvious, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And it does happen. And I think we need to recognize that. But let's talk about George Floyd for a second. And how has that affected you in Virginia from where you are? What is the impact of that from what you've seen around you?
So there's been, marches, protesting. I live not too far away from Washington, D.C. So a lot, I'm, I guess, for lack of a better term, in the suburbs. So we weren't really, there hasn't been really anything much about, what's happening, in terms of protest here. There's like a couple, but they were all just peaceful people marching, holding signs. Nothing of the sort of what you probably saw in Chicago or in other places where there's riots and looting, that sort of thing. It's unfortunate that he had to perish, in the way that he did, right? And the most unfortunate part of all of this is that you have, it's not just his death, it's, everything sort of that led up to it, right? You can analyze the whole situation and basically find just about, any pockets of it where it's like, in hindsight, it's always worth looking and be like, well, I would have done something differently. Well, probably you wouldn't have, right? And it's just an unfortunate situation that led both the cops and George Floyd into a place where, unfortunately, he had to pay for his life, right? The news is that the officer in question, he's facing serious charges, right? And other officers as well that were on the scene. I think there's something to be said about how, as a police officer, maybe some of the training or, things that they're being taught of should at least have some degree of consideration in terms of, restraints and using force, whatever it is, right? So there's good arguments being made right now in that regard. And the part that it's also happening is that, there's conversation here that, wouldn't happen before, or where, people were too scared to have, right? So if there's any light to it, like the fact that you and I can even be here talking about this is a win, right? Like usually you have people just screaming at each other and not providing a forum where there could be an exchange of conversation. And I think this is what's, if there's any sort of light here, it's that it now is creating mediums for people to actually have conversation, hard ones, right? But really, truly understanding each other. And so, like that's about it as as optimistic as you can look at this. There's still some very angry people out there. I personally don't think that looting a place is a way of having those kind of conversations. It just doesn't accomplish much. I think people are using his death, unfortunately, to do certain things that have nothing to do with the problem at hand. And that's unfortunate. So, there's that.
Yeah, the other agendas that are out there as well is a scary thing, and we see that anytime with extremism. Even in COVID, we've seen different things and people trying to impart their agendas and say this is the perfect time now because of the other distraction that's happening. But racism is far from a distraction because it is something that needs to be addressed and have good conversations about. And I got to tell you, as someone in my position, even when you and I first chatted, I'm like, Billy, I'm going to try to put together the questions for this and I am tiptoeing through the tulips on this one because I don't know what questions I should be asking in a lot of cases. And because I feel like anything I talk about is with this filter. So take us through now. And you talked about one conversation. One conversation is that we can't know what you go through on a daily basis. We can't know what an African American goes through on a daily basis. I'm going to turn the conversation as well to a bit broader here, because we in Calgary, and I'll just take my knowledge of Calgary, but we have, you know, a massive East Indian population. We have a massive you know, Chinese population. We have everything, actually, Japanese and all races who I think go through these different experience some level of the same thing, and in some level it's so different, and so we can't necessarily walk into each other's shoes. So two parts to this this question is, what are the conversations we should be having, and what should we be doing as a society?
So that's a good one. I think, you know, first of all, you know, having a conversation about race, it's hard enough, right? I think we all should recognize that racism is not just an American or Canadian issue. It is a global issue, right? Totally. And I, you know, and then let's be honest about it. Like, I think part of the reason why it's so hard to have conversations about it is because we don't want to acknowledge this simple fact, right? Racism exists not just in the United States, not just in Canada. It exists everywhere, right? I think part of the issue to me is that everywhere else it happens, there's not that much lights under it, right? Like to shine that it also happens other places. There's a whole lot of lights here, and by light I mean, you know, people with cell phones, media, you know, talking points to highlight the fact that it is there. I also believe that for as long as we have human-made systems, they're always prone to flaws. And racism is one of those flaws that unfortunately would never be eradicated, like per se. It could be dealt with when people have mediums like this where they can talk about, right? But and you know, as you know, as something in the system, like I don't know that you know, it will be virtually free of any sort of discrimination, and that's a somber thought. But I think knowing, you know, we need to knowing that this is the enemy. We can also win in different places, right? And then, for instance, like we can win in the way we engage people, right? Case in point, this is a Palestinian cafe, right? Like, I went to Palestine, I purchased this. To me, this is a souvenir, right? Like, and right, of a place that I absolutely came to love, right? I love my time in Israel, right? We should have conversations about why is it that, you know, in most cases, African Americans people don't like to discover other cultures, right? Or, you know, the notion of even this with someone doesn't sink in our mind, right? And you can make the same cases for very Caucasian-centric places, you know, or companies, right? The notion to even go and, you know, interact with other races doesn't as well. And so, and to me, that's what we should, if anything else, recognizing that our business is a global business, our communities are global communities, and the more informed you are about other people's way of life, the less you will be, you know, compelled to see color as the first thing, right? That's what we should be striving for, like towards. I think as people, is to understand that, you know, my business is not conditioned by my race, right? I take it as far as I want to, and that includes connections, that includes friendships, right? Like relationship is not conditioned on color. While we try, and sometimes we limit to that, just because certain people tend to agree with what we said, you know, and we're trying to limit that agreement to just a very particular group of people. I think that's the wrong way to approach anything, right? And so I will say, if people, you know, where do we go from here? We should consciously start looking for where there's deficiencies in our own social circles or business circle and working to remedy this. I'll give you an example. When I was in business school, when I got my MBA, we have capstone sort of courses to take, right? You know, one of them, and it's available to all students. You can decide where to go, to around the world, where, if you wanted to study a certain facade of the business, you can make decisions as to where you can go. My business school class had, I think it was about a third of my classmates were from India, right? So every day you will come to school, right? Like, they will interact with each other. Some of them will speak Hindi. There's some jokes that they will tell, or they will talk about certain things. And I couldn't partake in it because I didn't understand it. So the opportunity came for me to go to India for 10 days to learn some business practices and visiting the country. I signed up for it because when I was able to understand, to be in that community. And I did. Best 10 days that I could ever spend in India. And so coming back, I felt a different level of connections with my classmates. Just because, I spent 10 days somewhere. Like, it's not a lifetime. Just 10 days gives you a window of the world, or a window of the communities that you wouldn't even know, right? Why aren't we pursuing those opportunities, right? And so to me, that's like, well, if you have no interest of getting to know opportunities or another culture, like regardless of your race, you can't argue necessarily for people to recognize who you are if you don't express the same interest in them, right? Like, to me, that's where we need to go.
Yeah.
I answered the question, but I believe this is the remedy that people are ignoring. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I love what, and almost that understanding. I want to share two quick stories. And one of them was a friend of ours. We go to Puerto Vallarta all the time. And I just want to say, first of all, that we talk about color as an issue, and that's a very visible one. But you talked about your situation in Congo, where color wasn't the issue. It was this tribalism.
Yeah.
And then you talk about Palestine as a perfect example where, you have the exact same situation, and the issues, the things that Jews have and Jewish communities have been a part of anti-Semitism and things like that over, generations now is just massive. And the wars that we see, the civil wars that we see, and racism is very strong. You go to Ireland and it's the same type of thing. You go to Italy, it's the same thing. My father-in-law will not go to the south side of Italy because he's from northern Italy, and all the southerners are, whatever type thing. So, but I just want to share a quick story. One was we were in Puerto Vallarta, and we stay in Zona Romantica, which is the gay district, and we absolutely love it. It's the best place. We had a friend of ours there, and after spending a week there, I would say he was a little bit homophobic. And of course, you're in the absolute epicenter, mecca of gay culture there. And we had a blast. And at the end of it, and I'm almost embarrassed for him to have to say this, but he's like, boy, gays are people too. And you're like, oh my gosh, like, wow, heaven forbid. Like, that's crazy. And I'll tell you another story we're sharing with, because we're gonna get into this conversation here in a second about doing business with different cultures. But we had one of our realtors, and I was at their house, and we were doing dinner. He was telling us about where he's from and how corrupt the government was. Police pull you over, and you're like, oh, well, what'd you pull me over for? He's like, just give me a second here. And it's like, your tail light is a bit dirty, and this is a bit of a problem. Maybe, what do you got there? And he's like, well, I don't have any money. And he's like, well, he's like, well, I got this banana. And the officer says, well, I'll take that. And the guy literally had to bribe him with like a banana, and he didn't have any cash in his wallet. And that's all the officer was looking for, was a bribe. So fast forward to, we have someone from the similar culture, and there's a staff member who we had to terminate, unfortunately. And we sent over some paperwork, and there was something in there. There was an oversight on our part. Oh, we forgot to delete that from the template. And she was like, you guys are trying to, sneak this in. You guys are trying to, as a corrupt, trying to screw me in that way. And that was because of the culture that, she was hyper vigilant of where she grew up. And to me, that was, you see that and you just think, wow, like, no wonder you have to be suspicious. No wonder you have to approach that, because in their culture, that's a real concern. Like, that's a real issue. So I love what you talked about walking, a little bit in some of, and walking in somebody's shoes for a little bit, at least understanding, because, you understand these cultures and you go there to India. I would love to have that experience. I have not been to India. I think that's fantastic.
It would change your life. Like when you
I
go.
bet.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Let's talk for a second about racism in real estate, and we have it where there is pockets in our city that obviously, in every city has that. You have like Chinatown,
Sure.
and you have every areas, in Toronto there's like Little Italy, and obviously these people want to be around people with similar cultural practices as themselves and their friends and things like that, and even speak the language in a lot of cases. So we see that, but we see it constantly where realtors are discouraging areas of the city. And speaking of our mayor in Calgary anyways, trying to sort of figure that out. I don't know where I'm going with that. I just want to make that comment. But let's talk for a second just about dealing with ethnicities, different business practices, and sort of expectations without being prejudiced. How do you get past that prejudice that you sort of bring to a conversation, via business, via with a client, things like that? How is that approached? How should we approach that?
Honestly, like, I don't know how it is even present, right? And I'm being honest with this comment. Like, I don't know how this even came to be, right? I think some people just assume that because, let's just say, like, there's a flat, or a condo that happens to be in a primary Chinese district, and you have Caucasian people, it fits what they're looking for. And then you take it upon yourself to say, hey, maybe this is not a good place for them. Maybe I should wait for something to come up, right? Service shouldn't have any color associated with it, right?
Right.
And if you're a real estate agent, like, that's not even your call to make. You present the opportunity and say, look, here's the opportunity. Like, you were looking for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo. There's one that happens to be right in Chinatown. It is within your price range. It has everything you're looking for. Would you be interested in go seeing that, right? Let the client tell you, basically, right, like this, right? It's, to me, it is to tell them whether or not they're racist, right? I think that's sometimes the mistake that we as agents, we tend to jump quickly into this. I should present the opportunity based on the criteria they give me. Now, if they give me a criteria saying, like, hey, we don't want to live in Chinatown, I can't do my job properly, right? Because I'm like, well, now you're asking me to restrict your searches based on, culture or skin color, whatever it is. I can't do that as an agent. You might need to find another real estate agent. Like, I can't service you. You asked me to look for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo. This came up. Is exactly what you told me fit your criteria. If you don't want to go for it for any particular reason, other than the fact that maybe you can't afford it or whatever it is, that's okay. But, like, if you introduce race into it, like, then you need to look for a different realtor, right? Like, I think we need to be proactive with the business. And when there's, if for no other reasons, your clients or even you as a realtor, like, if you don't have any other reason other than race to avoid servicing people, that maybe you're in the wrong industry, right? So that's, to me, it should never be present in there. But the fact that it is just shows you that people, have biases. And we need to stand firm in saying, this is only so far we could go. I'm sticking with the business, right? And then, the same is for me, right? Like, I never want someone to look at me and give me opportunities simply by virtue of my color. Like, then you're not acknowledging the fact that I have worked hard. I studied. I have some experience. You just literally look at me and say, we don't have much black people in the organization. Maybe we should have Billy. It's like, well, that doesn't make me feel good, right?
Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be a quota to somebody else. Like, I want you to accept me on my own merit. And, sometimes it's a harder path. The easiest path will be for people to just kind of look at me and say, hey, yeah, we need diversity, right? Let's have Billy, and I don't want that path. I want you to look at my credentials and look at the things I worked on, and based on you make a decision, to either work with me or as an agent or whatever it is, based on those things. Right? And so to me, that's the opportunity that, I am fighting for. If if we are to articulate those things in those terms, I'm not I'm not protesting. I'm not updating for people. I'm trying to be diligent with the resources that have been given to me, simply because I want people to look at the way I think, make it conscious, decision based on my intellect. That's, anything beyond that, I can't control it. The things I control, it's like, the way I present myself, what the type of services I provide. That's what I want people to, to think about when they're looking to send me business or whatever. So
totally.
Especially when I was an agent, right? So racism in real estate is a hard one to tackle too, because, and this is back to a comment that you made earlier, Lindsay, like the notion of systematic racism. It's also been talked about in real estate. And to be completely honest, I have an issue with that, right? Because you basically saying to me that this whole system, real estate system, has been designed, right, to make people who look like me unsuccessful. Well, then what does that make me? Like an anomaly, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not the only one I can point to a lot of people of color in the industry who have done amazingly well. What is it that they got to real estate that, other people are not getting, right?
Yeah.
I have the same CRM. I reach out to my clients, I prospect, I do open houses, I use marketing, right? Like, so we have the same tools. They give or take, they've made it all available to us, right? I'm able to do the business. It's not the win, right? And now people are telling me that this very system is biased towards people who look like me. And I'm like, well, if that is even remotely the case, right? The best win you can do for me is to teach me, and then this is to everybody that's, any people here, right? If you believe that the industry is so disenfranchised toward people of color, the best win you can give them is to take the very industry where they're not supposed to succeed and make them widely successful.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
Like,
yeah.
Because then at some point people will realize it. It's like, well, wait a minute. This system was not supposed to work this way, yet it is, right? And I am a testament of it, right? If it wasn't supposed to work out, we wouldn't be here having this conversation. So I don't particularly agree that there's a system that was built towards my disfavor. And if there is, then the best way to beat the system is for me to be successful.
Totally. Love that.
Which will require investing, right? Like investing into my education, my training, right? So that I can literally stand and say, yes, system, you were not designed for me to be successful. Let me show you what I've done. There is no excuse for it, right? Like, and I think this is the spirit that broker owners, I think, should adopt, right? We can have conversations about racism any single day, right? You may learn something new, you may learn, or it may be just a rehashing of what you already know. But the proof is in the pudding, right? If you have agents of colors that can literally point out to the fact that this industry has made them successful, that's the win, right? And to me, that's what we should all strive towards. So I don't have time to worry about someone not liking me. I just, because of my color. Yeah. This is not something Billy worries about. Because I'm focusing on two things. I'm focusing on doing what's right by the people who invested into me and making sure they give me opportunities. I want to do right by them. And frankly, like if you're telling me that this entire system is biased towards me, then I'm going to work hard to show you that this is what I believe, in America, right? Like either the US or even Canada. It's not unlike any other places in the world where you can literally come out of nothing, utilize an oppressive system to be successful. Where does this happen?
Yeah,
right?
totally.
It would never happen in the Congo. Like I can tell you, in other places in the world, like it would never happen. But yet it happens here. There's a reason for that, right? And that's what, in spite of all the, the issues that may arise, unfortunate they may be, I still believe that I couldn't be in a better place in my journey in the industry and life if it wasn't me being here, like in this country. And I leverage opportunities that are presented just for that reason. So, I
feel like that's a great answer, and or some great comments as well to that. I want to have you speak for a second to, we have so many diverse people on the call here. I always say the call, like this is like 1996. Okay. It's not a conference call. Yes. On the webinar. So I got to catch up with the times here, but is someone who is the victim of racism, someone who is obviously, facing it head on, and it's overt, it's not subtle. It's not this, like, was I looked over for a position or not? It's like, this is like someone says a comment, a derogatory, whatever there is. How should people respond to that? What should educate people? And we're talking any person of color, Aboriginal, East Indian, it doesn't matter. Like what, even a Jew, it's like, how do people respond to that?
So I can never control what other people will say. That's a fact. I can never control how they will service me. That's not within my realm of control. I can control how I respond to it, right? And so to me, that's the first thing to realize, that it doesn't matter if you're competent. Someone out there will always, will try to pass judgment or will say something to you that may or may not be kosher. I get it, right? They're not my worry.
Yeah.
I don't worry about them simply because, I just don't, right? I can control the way I respond to it. And sometimes to me, it's like, I'm not even acknowledging that you're there, right? Or the Billy way of doing it, it's literally to turn all those things that I use negatively, to speak about me or about my race, and turning them into something, to be laughed at or a joke, right? So I'll give you an example, right? When I went to the Las Vegas conference, the event that we had, this past one was literally before Las Vegas shut down, and then, due to COVID. So we were still there, reduced attendance, whatever. So I was hanging out with one of our members, Kevin Skipworth, of Dexter Realty in Vancouver, BC. And we took this picture, right? And it was old Polaroid that, was there as kind of like a fun thing to have on the table to utilize to create memories. Like we took this picture and it had a flash, right? And so the picture comes out, we shake it up, and you can see Kevin, bright, colorful Kevin, Caucasian. And then literally I was asking, I'm like, well, something is not right here, because you can not see me. Like you can see my teeth, right? You can see my eyes. And that was it. I was like, here we go again.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is, it never fails, right? Like it just never fails, right?
Totally.
I think it's taking situations like this where people might feel uncomfortable and turning that into a way of breaking down barriers, right? And I'm usually pretty forward in saying stuff like this, because then you can literally see people's walls breaking down. When people realize that you will not, pass judgment upon them simply because they don't know what to say or they haven't encountered any situation of that nature, they open up, right? It's the same thing across all the culture, right? I have mad respect for people who take the time to even understand some form of the Congolese culture, right? Whatever they may be, right? And I'm not asking people to sacrifice whatever culture they came from in order to belong or try to belong to the other one. You can start by at least learning how to say hello in that culture, right? That's you know, and that's, it sounds so simple, but like if I speak, you know, I learned how to say hi in Arabic. So yesterday, matter of fact, my wife's friend who's from Lebanon, you know, it was basically the first time we kind of hung out. And I asked her, I was like, "You from Lebanon?" It's like, "Yeah." So you speak Arabic? She said, "Yes." And I was like, "Al marhaba," which is hi, hello in Arabic. She was like, "You have someone from the Congo who speaks Arabic to you? Like, it doesn't make sense."
Yeah,
I live for this, right? Like, I live for this, because what you're doing is basically, you know, you're causing people to try to find connections, like however far they might be. But what it's causing is that what you took the investment to learn at least that about me, and the fact that you know, you can greet me in my mother tongue. Let's talk. Like, we can connect. Like, I feel like I can trust, right? Like,
yes.
to me, that's the power we wield as real estate agents for every communities that we hang out with, right? Or we trying to help. At least some having some form of affinity that's just beyond the scarf, right? Like, it's a scarf plus something else, right? So like, I can walk to a Arab, you know, a Libyan store, I'll feel just fine. I can go to an Indian store, I feel just fine. I can go to a Chinese store, I feel just fine. I can go to a typical Southern store here in the United States, I don't fear that, right? Like, I've studied and lived among those people, and I came out just fine, right? And so to me, it's like the more you try to bridge, be the bridge of the people you want to connect. Like, become the connector beyond just real estate. Like, become the person that other people can look and say, you know what, this person is the one that I want on my team, because they allow me to connect with other people as well. So that's, to me, right? Like, this is where you go, right? Like, there's no other places to go. It's like, you have to be that link for a lot of people. You can't be, you know, I don't have time to worry about myself, right? Like, when I invest in the lives of others, magical thing happen. They invest back into me.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I want to dig in just for a second here into some. You've actually given this phenomenal piece of advice wrapped up in your comments, because, you know, realtors, you know, if you don't speak the language of somebody else, you can't properly represent them. Like, trying to explain something to them and things like that. So while you may not seek out clients that you can't speak the language with, you have to know that when you're representing your client with whatever nationality or race you're dealing with, and that's your client, and then you're going to get offers in from all these other cultures, all these other races, things like that, and from realtors who are all this, you know, that have these different backgrounds. And I suggest, my advice to any realtor is, especially in the areas that you deal with, it's like, I would be learning more about the East Indian culture, or you know, Punjabi, or Hindu, and you know, and Chinese and Mandarin and Cantonese, and like you said, learn the greetings of the language, learn a little bit about the standard business practices in there, because then when offers come in, whether the realtor or the client is there, you understand where they're coming from a little bit. You go to some of these cultures, and the barter system, you know, is way different than what we're used to in North America, where the price is what the price is. Like, that's totally different. So when an offer comes in, you know, some of the background about where this is, and you can adapt yourself to be understanding and appreciate what it is. And I suggest anybody go and visit some of these countries and things like that to get that level of understanding. And can you imagine if I had it on, I know for myself, like you said, where someone who has, a thick accent, you can tell right away they speak Punjabi, and you can say hello and, thank you for the offer in Punjabi. Like, that's going to go like you said, it's going to blow people away.
Yeah. And
so,
here's the other part, Lindsay, like, you have to live for those moments. Like, you have to seek them. It's not something that you just rest on the chair and hoping it will happen, right? I'm very conscious about seeking out those opportunities because I know how it makes other people feel. Case in point, like when I came to LeadingRE, I started, and when I was told that I would be handling the Canadian network, being bilingual, you have Quebec and Montreal, and it just English everywhere else. So having that opportunity for me was priceless. So one of our members, right, like it's been a while since she got in touch with the network. She just wanted a meeting with someone from LeadingRE. It just happened that I took over the Canadian accounts. So I set up time and I went to Montreal to meet with her. There is something she could have said in English, right? About sort of the business. She didn't. She learned, she thought when I was writing in French to her on email, I was being polite, right? So she'd always reply back in English. And so when we met and we sat down for lunch, I started speaking to her in French. And it was like a whole world opened up, right?
Yes.
She had a lot of things that she wanted to say, like about the business, about some things that we could do better, some feedbacks that she could never just kind of find the way to express it. This was literally cathartic for her, right? Like, that's what these occasions create. Is that sometimes people try to do, they try to assimilate to whether Canadian or American culture by speaking the language, right, to the best that they can. And they have so much to say, and only limit themselves because they don't know that we will understand them. By you even attempting to say hello, how are you in their language, you showing that you're willing to meet them where they are, which is the most privileged, and I say privilege, like it is so amazing what happened when you cross that bridge, because then people, not only are they speaking to you in English, but they tell you things too, things that they wouldn't normally say under a formal situation, right? Everyone who has sold real estate, myself, right? There's a moment that we all seek to have, is where we are at the kitchen table talking to our clients about their real estate need. I don't care if you use a CRM for connecting, right? This is the moment we all trying to get, because we all know that when we sit down there, we're having conversation with our clients, they're telling us their needs. It's right there. Like, this is where the sale happened. We're limiting ourselves when this is not the moment we're trying to attain. And that moment can literally be attained by you simply greeting someone in their mother tongue.
Yeah.
You don't have to be fluent in it. Just you knowing the customs and how to greet someone in there shows a different level of interest. That's beyond just the business. It's an interest to them, an interest to the culture, an interest to what they value, and speech language, right? And I think this is also the takeaway here. There's other thing that people consider personal, like in terms of identity. Language is one of them, right? So if you're showing that you care about a person enough to at least say some things in their language, boy, you got them, right? You don't need to be at a kitchen table, right? Like, then you get invited now to the kitchen table, not to just sit there and do business, like to experience something that you would never had the opportunity to experience before. That's where color to me fades away. Like it at that point, it doesn't even exist, right? Like you get invited to weddings, you get, like that family becomes the view as one of their own, right? You're helping cousins and other family members moving in, right? You are their person. To me, that's what we should be aspiring towards, right? And once your business reaches that point, color has nothing to do with it, right?
Yeah.
Nothing. transactions and clients just come because now they know, that they view you as one of their own,
Yeah. Billy, that's so great. I love that. And taking that interest, being curious enough, because we don't get to choose. We don't get to choose our color. We didn't get to choose our race. And
No.
that's goes for anybody who is white or East Indian or Aboriginal or Black or whatever it has to be. You don't get to choose. This is the hand you're dealt, and I think we all need to show interest and curiosity in others, and that would be a great place to start. As part of this. Billy, we're out of time, and I just can't thank you enough for the knowledge and the value that you shared with us today, and the perspective, more importantly. And I got to say, now that we've gone through this conversation, now we're going to talk to you about internet leads, and the next one we're going to talk about is going to be, let's get down to business now. Those are the conversations we're going to have next. This was timely, but I hope everyone, I know everyone enjoyed this, and get used to seeing Billy, because we're going to be tapping his huge brain for a lot of stuff. And Billy, thank you for coming on and having this conversation with us today.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And for everyone listening in, like this medium where you can have exchange, right, of ideas, and whether you disagree with people, this is the only way to do this, right? Don't make silos, right? Having nothing to say doesn't mean that you're a bad person. So much of nothing good is said in rush, right? Like, so if you need to take the time to think about things, it's perfectly okay, right? And if you still don't know what to do or what to say, at least start, be confident enough that, I guess, you can reach out to me, right? If you wanted to have further conversation, Lindsay has my contact information, and I don't mind if you share that, Lindsay. If people wanted to just ask further questions, that's perfectly fine too. And so that's it on my part. So
awesome. Billy, we're getting requests for you to write a book, so please consider that. That's great. I totally agree. What a story you have. I think it's fantastic. So Billy, thank you again. And everybody, thank you as always for tuning in. And don't forget, this is CI Realty Business Mastery. Follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and you can download and watch other episodes that we've done on anywhere you get your podcasts. So just search CI Realty Business Mastery. Billy Ekofo, Business VP of Business Solutions for leading real estate companies of the world. Billy, thank you again. And
my pleasure.
All the best, everybody. We'll see you guys next week.
Will do.
Thanks.